It's Wednesday and we're on day 3 of our training. Today we have Kenny Mars with us. So our agenda for the day is to review a number of the systems that we've already gone over in days 1 and 2. We still have some questions that we wanted answered. We're going to be talking about protective anodes, general maintenance items, and we'll practice launching the Dinghy. And then there are a few more systems that we haven't covered in the previous 2 days that we'll go over here. One of today's topics was protective anodes, of which the R43 has 6 of them. And in addition, there's an active corrosion protection system as well. So why do we need these? And this is an explanation that I found helpful for me. And that is when you had 2 different kinds of metals in an electrolyte, like seawater. I'll take the example here as a bronze propeller connected to a stainless steel shaft. Then one of those metals will have a negative charge compared to the other metal. And so the one with the most negative charge will be the anode. And in the process of sending electrons over to the cathode, it loses electrons and the metal corrodes. So we don't want that to happen. And so the question is, how do we stop that? In this battery that we've created by putting into the water 2 different metals, the metal that has the lowest electronegative potential is the one that's going to be supplying the electrons, and that's going to be the one that oxidizes and corrodes. And so one of the ways to protect the equipment that we want to protect is by taking another metal that has even lower electronegative potential. Those metals might be aluminum, magnesium, and zinc, and attach it to the system. And then that lowest potential then becomes the anode for the system, and it provides the electrons, and it's the one that corrodes, as the pictures on the lower left are showing. So the R43 has 6 of these protective anodes. All of them are made out of zinc. There's a round zinc on each of the 2 trim tabs. There's a zinc on the exhaust port on each of the propulsion units, and then 2 transom zincs. The recommendation is that they should be checked often and then replaced roughly every 6 months, or it depends on how quickly they're eroding. When we got our boat, after about 7 months in the chuck, all of the zincs were pretty deteriorated, and so we ended up replacing them at that time. The trim tab anodes are mounted on the very outside edge of the trim tabs. They're relatively easily reached without getting wet. Just lay down on the swim step and you can reach over and access these guys. Each of the drive units has a anode that's located in the exhaust port. This is a relatively tight space, and the diver did report that it wasn't very easy to get these out, and required an extra long Allen wrench in order to be able to do that. There are 2 large plate anodes that are located on the transom of the R43. The lower one is the backup anode for the ACP, that is the Active Corrosion Protection System. And the other diver's dream plate is for any items that don't have their own specific zinc, like the through holes. Shown here also are the part numbers for both of these items. Our Volvo IPS drives have something called an Active Corrosion Protection System. It works by injecting a current into this galvanic cell system, and it automatically measures the existing currents that are produced by the dissimilar metals in the water, and then produces a countercurrent to effectively oppose that. So supposedly it eliminates the need for sacrificial anodes on the drive, even though we have a large plate backup zinc and zincs in the exhaust ports. It must work pretty well, because the ACP anode showed almost nowhere, even after 7 months that the boat had been operational, whereas all the other zincs had significant erosion. You can also check the corrosion protection status from one of the vessel pages on our Garmin displays. Over the past few days, Kenny, Ivan, and Tim have covered a number of maintenance items. The engine service protocol, which describes the types of maintenance that needs to be done for various items, is shown here on the right. That can be downloaded from the Volvo website. The things like oil filters and changing the oil, typically those intervals are about 200 hours. I'm just going to talk about just a few of the things here, the cleaning the seawater strainers and flushing the seawater lines. I want to draw people's attention to the As the Prop Turns webinar that Tim Bates put on spring maintenance. He's got some really good descriptions on things like changing the primary and secondary fuel filters. So rather than trying to reproduce that, I'll refer people to that particular YouTube session. But we will be talking just a little bit about one of the differences between the R41 and the R43 is this U-lube oil change system. So we'll cover that here in just a little bit. There are 4 seawater strainers on the boat. 2 of them are on the engines, and then there are 2 that run to the AC units and to the Westerbeek generator. They all are fairly easy to clean. You remove the retaining metal band and pop the plastic lid off, and then you can pull out the strainer basket from the bucket there. The strainer basket can have seaweed and other bits of debris in there, so clean that out and then replace that back into the bucket. There are 2 metal pegs in there that fit inside 2 holes in the strainer basket, so line those up and you can be sure that you've got the right orientation for that strainer basket when you replace it. It is recommended that you, on occasion or frequently, flush the raw water systems, the systems that use raw water for cooling, with fresh water. So the process is pretty simple. You close the valve on the input seawater cock, then open up the lid to the seawater strainer, and you can put a freshwater hose in there and get that started, and then start whatever unit you're trying to flush, the air conditioning units or the engine or the generator. Run that for several minutes to get water through there, and then turn it off. And don't forget to open the valve back up again when you're done. So there are 2 fuel filters per engine that need to be changed at the 200-hour or annual interval. There's a primary filter shown here with the white canister and the T-handle on the top, mainly designed to separate water from the fuel. And then there's a secondary filter after that, a smaller one painted green here, and it also has a water sensor in it, but it's a filter designed to remove some of the finer elements that might be in the fuel. Changing these has a really nice description in the webinar that I mentioned before, and so I'll refer people to that rather than trying to duplicate that here. One of the differences between the older R41 and the new R43 is this U-lube oil change system. So now you've got the ability to do all your oil change service right there while the boat's sitting in the water. So you can change not only the engine oil, but the transmission drive oil as well. So there's no need to haul the boat out of the water to do those services. Also, the generator oil can be changed with this system as well. So there's a hose that runs to the drain pans in each of those units. Turn the switch, the valve, and then once the pump goes, it starts sucking the oil out of that particular unit, and then goes to an exit hose, and you've placed a bucket underneath that exit hose to collect the drained oil, and then you can do that for all of these systems. There are 2 spin-off oil filters on each of our engines. Now these have different part numbers and different hole sizes, so make sure you get one of each, and as well the air filter. So those are items that also need the 200-hour interval between changing. The drive oil and filters have a little bit longer service interval. They're every 2 years or 400 hours. The propeller system does not really require any service. but every 2 or 3 years we'll probably be pulling it out to redo the bottom paint and the prop speed. And at that time, they'd recommend we take off the propellers and grease the propeller shaft as well. There's quite a large stack of manuals for each of the systems that are installed on the boat. One of which is this nice hard copy IPS Operators Manual that has some very good information in it, and even more on how to do service and maintenance you can get in a handbook that you can download at the Volvo website as well. Well, I'm not sure if I would call this a maintenance item, but they did mention that one of the things that Ranger and Volvo recommends is this Stanodyne diesel fuel additive. So there's this particular formulation that apparently has a lot of good features associated with it. So we'll be buying and using this with every fill-up as well. One of the options that's available is to add a diesel heater unit to the R43, and we did that. So we have 2 of those, one for the guest berth and one for the master suite. And there's some maintenance items associated with these, so we should look at the fuel filter at least annually, and then replace it if necessary. So to do that, there's a black box that contains the fuel filter and the fuel pump. And since both of these are located in the guest berth behind the wall panel, once you open them up, you can take a look and see the fuel filter here, and see that if the fuel level in the filter is up to about halfway or thereabouts, then the filter is still good. But if that filter canister is full of fuel, that means that the filter element is starting to get blocked, and it needs to be replaced at that time. The bilge pumps probably don't need a lot of maintenance, but they can accumulate debris and things in the pump itself. So it's not difficult to unhook these and inspect the interior. And there's a process for doing that Tim describes in the webinar. So Kenny spent some time with us going over systems we'd covered in days 1 and 2. We had some residual questions for those. But then he also took us through some of the systems that we hadn't talked about yet. For example, the refrigerators. It seems like we have an ample supply of cooling power on the boat. There are 4 refrigerators, 1 freezer, 1 ice maker, and 1 wine cooler, all of which will run on DC 12-volt power when the house switch is on. Some of these will also run off of AC as well. The R43 comes with a 3-burner stovetop and oven that runs on propane. The propane is located in 2 large tanks in a hatch here shown on the upper command deck. To operate this system, turn on the valves at the tank, come back down into the galley and turn on the solenoid using this button here on the fume detector. And then when you want to ignite the burner, you basically turn one of the burner knobs counterclockwise, hold it in, push it in a little bit, and then press the igniter button. The R43 comes equipped with one of these cool electric barbecue units. Ours is located up on the command bridge. We never used the one we had on our R27, I guess mainly because we didn't have a generator. But now that we do have, I can see this being used a lot more often. It was a pretty miserable day when Kenny was going through our instruction. We did have one calm period, which we took advantage of for him to show us how to launch the dinghy. The process for launching the dinghy begins by taking the cotter pin from the lock bar and then sliding that bar out of the tube. And then you raise the davit up to the lifting position and reinsert the lock bar into its new hole, and then reattaching the cotter pin. The next step then is attaching the controller, electronic hand controller, to the davit via this plug on the side there. And then you can manually swing the davit over the top of the dinghy and lower the carabiner until you can clip it into the 3-point lifting harness. And once that's done, then you can use your electronic controls to raise the dinghy until it's clear of the docking cradle. and then attach control lines fore and aft on the dinghy. Then you can manually rotate the dinghy perpendicular to the boat, and so it's clear of the davit's resting stanchion, and that'll allow you to swing it out over the side. And then while you're controlling its orientation with the guide ropes, you can lower it back down into the water. It's the afternoon on day 3, and we have completed our formal training on the R43. Our Labrador Retriever Mackenzie has claimed her spot on the boat, essentially the center of our bed in the master suite. And there we are, the happy new owners of the Maggie N2. We've cracked open a bottle of champagne and making a toast to the future and the many enjoyable hours we look forward to spending on this vessel. And to cap it all off, that evening we had this beautiful sunset, definitely a red sky at night, and for us a sailor's delight. And so thanks Kenny, Ivan, Tim for all your great help over the last 3 days, and stay tuned for our next video covering our trip back to Birch Bay Village.